Hello, happy Sunday, and I'm back with my second video cast of our case studies. This week I'm dealing with Chapter 8. In this case study, Tom Davis is the principal of a small community in a rural area. His new math teacher is Mark Scott, who happens to be living with his girlfriend. Scott is a strong teacher, is described as dynamic, but the parents of the community are outraged at the living arrangement that he has right now. Davis supports Scott in his private life and seeks no disciplinary action. To address the questions in the book, Tom is justified in approaching Scott. I believe that the conversation between the two men is warranted in this situation, if only out of professional courtesy. As a teacher, I would appreciate it if there was something going on with the community that's being called in about that maybe I don't know is going on. If that was brought to my attention so I could answer for myself, but also to defend myself. I think that's a fair right that we have. Out of professional courtesy, I think that the principal talks with Scott, lets him know what kind of phone calls he's been getting, maybe not necessarily from the people that are giving them, but just to know that pressure is out there. It's meant to inform Scott of the complaints, but also to show his support. I liked how the principal decided to say that whatever happens in your private life is your private life. It said also, for the principal's stance, it's a documentable action that expresses community pressure, but also solidifies the school's position. If it were to come to the next step, or there was a disagreement publicly between teacher and community members, at least the principal can go back and say, hey, we did have this conversation. Now, what can we do next to support either you as a teacher or the community, depending on how the situation plays out? How did Davis handle the situation? I think that the conversation acknowledging the concern is enough to handle the situation. I don't think any sort of action is necessary on the part of the school here. It's a step that the principal can offer up to the community to say, hey, we have talked about this. He knows that you're not as excited about the living arrangement as you could be, but there's really nothing we can do. It's a private matter. It's between him and his girlfriend. It's not affecting what's going on in the classroom. And so it's not our place to judge or say anything on that point. Obviously, if Scott keeps the relationship out of his classroom, there's very little action that can be taken in regards to his personal life. Even in the rural South, modern times are much more accepting of this arrangement. And I'll talk about in a few minutes just how if we allow communities to start dictating our moral standards, everybody's view from each person's viewpoint, then we're opening up a whole new issue. Does the principal of a school have the right to infringe on a teacher's private life? I think that if there is a significant community outcry, the principal does have a right to discuss that with the teacher, and especially if that private life is starting to slip into the school day, either things being said in class or visitors, that kind of thing is disrupting the educational environment, then the principal has every right to infringe on the private life. I think one thing we might not always consider when we're thinking about personnel issues is that, we want to have these conversations with our staff, not only as their superior, but also as a caring individual. If someone's new to a community, they don't have the support system that they had at home or growing up, be it parents or friends or church members, particularly if they've moved a long distance and they are not married. They may be alone and not have anybody at all to fall back and talk to when they're in a stressful situation. And we all know that moving to a new place, starting a new job, finding a new relationship, all these are very stressful situations. So if that teacher is someone that's new to the community, then we could reach out to them and say, hey, I recognize this is going on. I've had some phone calls, ask them how they're doing, give them a chance to talk to somebody and show that you care. Not only does that cover you from an administrative standpoint, it also scores you some points with your faculty to know that, hey, you care and you're someone they can come to and talk to and show them that support that they might be lacking elsewhere. So the plan of action in this situation that I would follow, I believe that the conversation is enough to handle the situation. The principal can report to the concerned citizens that he has spoken with the teacher. The contents of that conversation are not required to be disclosed to the community at all. It could be simply, I've talked to him, it's handled, thank you very much. And if they try to pry further into it, just tell them it's not their place to be concerned with that. The contents of the conversation are privileged, in my opinion, between the administrator and the faculty member. If the pressure continues to grow or something happens that relationship is brought into the classroom impacting the teacher's performance, then I believe it's time for a little bit more administrative action. Obviously, we don't want to allow the community at large to dictate to us how we run our school. We want to listen to their concerns, but it's not really their choice in hiring and firing educators in the school system. If that pressure grows and is impacting the educational unit, I think as a principal, I would support the teacher in finishing the school year if they would like to stay. And again, if nothing's being brought into the classroom, it's not affecting work performance, then I think I would still support that teacher. But I might offer them the opportunity to transfer to another school within the same district, or offer them the chance if they'd like to move on somewhere else. As obviously, if I were in a situation the community was acting that way towards me, I'd probably want to also move on as well. I'd offer them a positive review, a positive recommendation, and help them as much as I can in finding a new position. Obviously, I'm very squarely on the side of the employee and see no need for a plan of termination in this case study. And would the court support anything as far as disciplinary action goes in this case? From what I've read in the case study and from our textbook, I don't believe there would be any support in the courts for this. The Erb case, as referenced in the textbook, points out to us that if there is not an impact within the classroom, then the teacher's private life is their private life, and the court would support that. When we leave the classrooms and we walk out of the school's doors, we are private citizens and we're entitled to all the same rights and privileges as the community we serve. Our profession carries with it a certain weight of responsibility for our moral actions and community standards, but I believe that there is a definite line to be drawn there to protect our rights as private citizens. In this case, the teacher is an outstanding professional. His choices are not affecting his class, and the courts would support the teacher in maintaining his position and living arrangement. As I mentioned earlier, I think if we were to allow communities to dictate how we hire and fire faculty and how someone else's private affairs are handled, we are opening Pandora's box, so to speak, to everybody's skeletons. I don't think we want to go down the path of saying, well, so-and-so does this, so we need to shun them, or so-and-so does this. And who is to really decide what is the standard that we are willing to accept and what we're willing to take action on? I think that's a messy situation. I think that's very divisive in a community, and I think that's not what we would be trying to achieve as an educational system. So those are my thoughts and my opinions on this case study, supported with what I've read from the textbook and the court cases referenced therein. Thank you guys. Have a great rest of your weekend and 2 more weeks to go.